Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Metaphysical Wisdom Podcast. I'm here with my friend Jeannie Zandi. Welcome, Jeannie. Welcome back, I should say.
Nice to be here.
Wonderful. Thank you for being here. We're going to talk about true strength today, the relationship between yin and yang. Jeannie, you're my go-to gal when it comes to speaking about yin and just how needed it is in our culture. And I just can't wait to hear what you have to say. And I know you have some events coming up in relationship to this topic. So we're going to give you a chance to bring that forward as well. So bring it on, girl. Let's have it.
Oh my goodness. Uh, um, I think it's particularly relevant right now because we're seeing a various kind of culturally conditioned models of what we would think of as strength in the whole Ukraine situation. Strength being, the ability to dominate and all this kind of thing, and as well as what's I find somewhat miraculous, the strength of yin, as it's shown in the Western response of collaboration and standing together, and that sort of thing. And so I think it's a good time to talk about this. And as well as I've had my focus move again really toward yin and the necessity of us really learning about and integrating, exploring the nature of true yin, what's called often divine feminine, and yang, what's often called divine masculine. But I don't like to use those two because they sound very gendered, and we tend to bring gender along, which can be confusing, and particularly with the conditioned sex roles that separate sort of what's feminine, what's masculine. So how I like to describe yin and yang is that in the life cycle of a plant, you can see the what normally looks like the start, right? And it's always wheeling around a wheel, so anywhere you pick could be the start. But the quiet earth, the seed resting, it poking a sprout out and growing and strengthening and leafing and flowering and fruiting. And that's sort of high noon, the fruit, the sturdy. And then the yin part of the cycle, which is often not even depicted in diagrams of the plant cycle, which tells you, how much we actually even look to yin as though it's something, is the softening and the fading and the sinking and the falling and the rotting and the returning to earth and returning to that silent ground. And I wanted to talk about true strength because we really need a new model of strength in our culture. We're growing up, but we're growing up slowly. And I've been able to have a front row seat to yin growing into yang by giving birth to a daughter and watching her in her rising and strengthening, as well as her softness, to watch the integration of those and how they work in a human being. And I've been interested my whole life in gender and these two energies and how a whole integrated human being both can take a sturdy stand, take directed action, as well as be soft, be vulnerable, be interdependent. And I find that it's somewhat challenging sometimes to talk about yin because yin is so forgotten, demonized, painted with yuck in our culture that there aren't a lot of words to talk about it, even in our language, that really glorify and shine a light on its beauty and its role in strength. So I can also pause, or let me know if you at any point have something you want to say, or ask. I can go on a roll here and um,
I'm tracking you.
okay, good, good. Um, when I was born in the 60s, and when the women's movement, the portion of the women's movement that was starting in the late 60s and early 70s, Gloria Steinem, National Organization for Women, all that. My mom was in a consciousness raising group. I was coming of age. I was a young teenager during that time, and um, 13 years old, I can remember like hustling on through the living room to get away from those weird women who were doing their weird little support group in there. I was a tomboy, and women's sharing feelings just looked kind of embarrassing to me. And I grew up with the model of strength being, I can remember, it was like, in order for me to earn self-respect in this yin hating culture, I needed to become strong like the boys. That was the only model of strength that I really had, was the one that my culture handed to me, at least the only one that I was encouraged to look at or celebrate, despite the strength of all of the women in my family line who have given birth and raised children, et cetera, et cetera. Um, that that's in the background. No one celebrates that necessarily as strength. Um, so I was, as a young woman, busily trying to find a way to respect myself, which included, you know, beating the boys at things, attempting to be a boy, as though that was the model of the only way to be a strong human being. And, I did that up, with sports and different things, and have definitely explored that side of things, the yang side of things, the active side, the sturdy side, um, the way that we usually think about strength. And at the same time, maturing and being interested in wholeness, I was also, okay, what's all this pink stuff? What's all this femme stuff? What's all this softness? It was a very shadowed area for me. I think I come from a long line of tomboyish women, and I was sort of allergic to anything that was very softy, and didn't learn about that being anything but humiliating as I grew up. Um, and so I did a lot of exploration of that side of things, of opening to feelings and opening the heart and that kind of thing. And it wasn't till the dark night of the soul that I experienced a kind of a spiritual deconstruction where I could not prevail. The yang aspect of me, the go get 'em, overcome side of me completely failed. I was absolutely pinned in my life in a way that I couldn't understand, get on top of, control. I couldn't make anything go the way I needed to make it go. And it was like a force feeding of yin. It was a pinning and a forced exploration of helplessness, powerlessness, inability to go forward, and a complete, and I'd already explored some of this, a complete exploration of going down, of going in, of surrendering to what is. And the extent of that, I don't think I would have ever glimpsed had it not been for the circumstances in my life that pinned me in the way that I was pinned. And, at first I thought it was quite a travesty. But as I opened and gave in to that, and allowed some of the my culture's curse of that to burn off, I opened to a place of the beauty, the utter beauty of surrender, the utter beauty of being bested. Now, I would not have ever known there was something like that, if I was talking to my 12 or 13-year-old self, I would have been like, what are you even talking about? Losing, being bested, what? And when the force that is besting you doesn't have a face on it, it's very difficult to run what we run on this dynamic, which is there is an oppressor, there's a jerk that is doing this to me. I couldn't really run, although I tried, God as oppressor, me as victim. I sure tried that. But that soon wore off. And the beauty of surrender started to show itself, the beauty of being softened. And I have a lot of stories in here of, from having some work done on my shoulder called prolotherapy, where the woman put a needle into my shoulder without anesthesia, to help me with a frozen shoulder. And this was one of my experiments in yin during that dark period where, my whole body said, punch her and run as the needle went in, right? But I opened and I softened and I opened and I softened and I opened and I softened. And what I discovered in there was unbelievable beauty. Like my whole being was as soft as ash. There was this beautiful bliss, in the willingness to be bested. And when we grieve, when we're ill, when we're stopped cold by circumstances in our lives that we can't control, there is an opportunity, and it's a tricky opportunity because at first there can be a lot of fear, a lot of grief, and we try to get out of there just as soon as we can because of that often, and because of what our culture says about someone who's not showing forward movement. But there is this deeper movement that's happening, the movement of growing roots, the movement of descending and becoming intimate with the ground of being, with the deeper aspects of ourselves, with in a way, the earth of our being, the soil of our being. And when we are comfortable in that place of nothing, in that place of nothing to show for ourselves, in the place at the bottom of grief, then what rises out of there, the yang that rises out of there, the action that rises out of there, is not fueled by fear or domination. It's fueled by what nature is fueled by. It's fueled by love. It's fueled by true unfolding versus sort of compensating for feeling insecure or whatever. And from that place of strength, which is very grounded, very comfortable, having nothing to show for itself. And one great example of this is the Kung Fu series of the early 70s, with Quan Yang Chang, I think his name is. Quan Yang Kane, I forget his name. He's like supposedly half American, half Chinese, and he's trained in a Shaolin monastery in China. And he walks with such a tender, humble way and makes friends with children and women and animals and the downtrodden. And, then of course in this one, kicks butt when he needs to protect the victimized, right? But what a beautiful inoculation we all got who were growing up at that time and watched that show, of a model of strength that included humility, included presence, included tenderness. And this kind of strength is integrated in the heart, with the heart. This kind of strength includes a sense of the collective, of oneness, that there's no bad person. There are only people who are confused or operating out of pain. And it's incredibly effective in its call to virtue, as opposed to its need to separate and dominate. That, to invite a human being, to treat a human being who is in mid rage and reaction, given that you have the capacity to invite a being who looks like they're about to be violent, who has harsh words, to see them as someone who's in pain, and to meet them as a fellow human being who is in pain, and to say, hey, what's needed here? What do you need here? Hey, friend, has a completely different outcome then getting our muscles on up to vanquish them. And there's this beautiful story. I wish I remembered the name of the book and the name of the man, but there's a man who studied Aikido who wrote a book. Trust me, just don't remember the title. And he wrote about the moment he learned about Aikido. He was in Japan. He was studying Aikido. He was feeling real badass after all his training, and he was hoping to have some chances to use his Aikido, when he came out of there. And I know what this is like. I came out of a self-defense course feeling like this, like, go ahead and mess with me, man. I got moves, kind of thing. And he's walking through the streets of Japan, and he's just waiting to be able to, protect someone innocent or whatever. And he gets on a train, and there's a man who he sees out the window who's coming through the crowd, a very big man who appears to be drunk. And the man is very roughly pushing people aside and has no regard and is just basically being a real jerk. And he starts getting fired up and thinking maybe he can use his skills. And the man gets on his train and starts to come down the aisle and is being similarly rough. And he's getting all, ready. And a few rows up, there's a tiny little old man with a seat next to him. And the tiny little man says, hey, friend, sit here. And the big man sits down, and they start to have a conversation that looks something like, where are you from? Here's where I'm from. Where are you going? Oh, here's where I'm going. I'm going home to my wife, the old man. And then the big man is like, I lost my wife and this and that, starts to cry, and pretty soon he has his head in the old man's lap, and the old man's petting his head. And the man says, that's the day that I learned about Aikido.
Mm-hmm.
And Morihei Ueshiba, the founder of Aikido, talks about how Aikido is based on the universe's love and the movements of love. And when I learned Aikido, I learned Aikido from a male teacher and a female teacher, Bob and Jude. And one of the things, I think it was Jude that said, but it could have been Bob, because they both had this beautiful way of honoring both yin and yang. They said a lot of the movements of Aikido, you are bringing someone in close to your body, you're whirling around the center axis, and then you're bringing them down to the ground, to the mother. You're basically saying, come here, my darling, you seem to be really off balance. Here, have some earth. And I had some experiences in Aikido of how yin vanquishes yang, doing an exercise with my very sturdy sensei Bob called Kokia Dosa, where you sit opposite the person, and I was to see if I could knock him over. He weighed many more. He was like, looked like he was made of like a tree stump. Just like so solid and strong. And here I am, a young woman in my early 30s, and I took my hands and I summoned as much love as I could for him, because I really had a lot of love for him. And I brought the practices. He's holding my wrists, and my hands just wanted to go right for his heart. And I went right into his heart in this really gentle, feminine way. And I separated his hands, one up, one down, entirely with my heart in love toward his heart. And he toppled right over. I was surprised. And it was all this connection, this beautiful softness. And I don't know, I'll pause there. This is one of my favorite topics, because I feel like the world is hungry for models of human beings who have integrated yin and yang, and who are moving from a kind of a strength. We can recognize it in leaders, and we can recognize it in characters in movies as well. They're often the king or the queen, and we feel like, wow, they're sturdy and they're fair and they're tender. Jean-Luc Picard is a great example in Star Trek.
Mm-hmm.
I'll pause for a second.
Well, thank you for sharing. Yeah. There's something that was coming. There's a lot of threads coming. I'm going to go back and track a couple of those and pull them through. in yeah, the true strength of yin and yang is there's this acquiescing of not identifying with either one, but it being fluid and able to um, come from whatever's needed in the moment, but
Exactly.
with complete awareness, of acceptance of also what's in the moment without judging, but just kind of mirroring or complementing through your unique ability to blend these forces. There may be a percentage of yin and a percentage of yang, however you want to say that, that's needed. And how do you, the sensitivity to know where that sweet spot is and come from that and hold space for what's there feels like true strength and what you're sharing through your experience. The other piece that wants to be brought forward is I've had similar undoings, and yeah, there's just a grace. It's not something, when we use the word grace, we often think of grace as some blessing bestowed upon us that we're just so open to receive and grateful. But sometimes grace comes in these ways that just take apart the known to reveal that to liberate the unknown,
Yeah.
to crack the shell so that what's inside can come to life, because without that cracking of the shell, what's inside is suffocating. It's dying to be born, and if the shell doesn't crack, it's literally going to die. And so that cracking of the vessel is what I feel like we're in culturally. And to have people who can speak about what's actually occurring is a helpful kind of talisman or navigation, because yeah, if you're giving birth and you don't know you're giving birth, you're going through this, these pains, and when you know what's occurring, it's a lot easier to be with it, not comfortable, but easier, knowing you're in a process, and we're in a process individually and collectively, and you're describing it and helping people make sense of that. And one thing I witnessed in your retreats is that just your openness to allow whoever wants to come forward and speak. That's like this holding space for what is without needing to control it or have an answer or yeah, but just to really trust your ability to meet what's arising. And it's not always pretty, it's not always comfortable, but yet we can allow ourselves to be uncomfortable, which is what I think is really coming up here, because a lot of us have been conditioned to be in control, to seek things and avoid other things. And whenever we're seeking and avoiding, we're not free to be with what is. And so I feel like that's another version of true strength.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm reflecting on, how do I say this? Part of what yin does, part of the movement of yin is deconstruction, is dissolving structures that are ready to be dissolved, whether it's, an animal that has died and all the little beasties come and pick it clean, and then it returns to the earth, and this is something that we don't have pictures of. We throw the flowers out as soon as they start to get a little brown, right? We're not interested in watching flowers decompose on our kitchen table, at least most of us. We worship the spring and the fall, right? But we have, as human beings, and culturally, institutionally, etc. And you can see this reflected in everything. You can see it reflected in relationship. You can see it reflected in business. You can see it reflected in our own personal psyches as we develop and mature. That we have these cycles of building structure and allowing structure to dissolve. We're kind of scared of the part where structure dissolves, and so we tend to put it off as long as we can. We don't have supports or initiations in our culture to recognize and honor deconstruction, only to recognize and honor achievement and production. But this, one of the hallmarks of spiritual evolution and embodiment is that the structures that are outmoded, the structures that we built, the personality structures, the strategies, the beliefs, and all that, that we built from our early childhood environments that become, that may have saved our butts at the time, but then become obsolete, start to limit us and make us feel like prisoners in our own bodies. When we get these sort of the vessel breaking, as you were talking about, or life circumstances, or just something that rises from inside that starts to take us apart, we don't know what to do, and we feel like we're doing something wrong, but this is a deep part of nature. And what this serves is exactly what you were talking about, the cracking of the old structure that allows new life to emerge and to be integrated. And one of the amazing things that I've been able to witness right in my own system is that nature is alive and well and moving through us. True nature, we could say true nature is nature, and wants to live as us in a very free and capable way, despite our will or our ideas. And one of the things that happens as the old structures fall and the new life, new life at first, doesn't move its arms or its legs. It's just like a baby, it can't use any of that. It's just a presence at first. And when people that I work with go through some kind of spiritual deconstruction, the feeling is like, wow, the only place that I feel real is just simply being here. As soon as I speak, my voice is filled with conditioning. As soon as I act, I'm acting from conditioning. But when I sit in this presence, oh, I feel so aligned. And the process of embodiment is that the old ways of speaking and moving and believing and all that give way toward this new green, woven into nature kind of force that inherently has skillful means with it. And some of this is the maturing of our capacities, because when we're just a new open nub, we might not know how to set a boundary. We might not even know yet or be clear about what's coming at us. We have so many capacities that sort of need to be cleaned off of conditioned use, and that new greening allowed to enter them, so we are seeing clearly, we are understanding clearly, we are able to speak and move and act from there. And sometimes people will ask me a question about, what do I do here? What do I do there? And how do I say this? There's always this sense that the true move, the true what should be done or whatever, grows out of the moment like a living thing when you are surrendered to true nature. It's no longer, you can't look it up in a book. It's not in the head as good people behave like this, bad people behave like this is what you should do. And this is why, Jesus said, I am the word, I am the life. My teaching is myself, is that a being who has embodied this cracking open moves like nature. And whether yin or yang is called for is not a reflection, like I'm going to reflect now, should I use my yin or should I use my yang? It's more that you become like a river, that the river just moves without any thinking about it. It moves with appropriateness. It moves skillfully. And for that to be fully mature, all the capacities have to also be cleaned off and reclaimed by the new. Because, and that's really a kind of a challenging process, because when we're that kind of awake nub and we're not sure how to live in the world, we can't live the old way. It feels kind of yucky, but there is no new way. People can get really scared. They can feel like, they took a wrong turn, or like they lost all their capacities. And it takes a while to be utterly true to that beingness, and the taste of truth in the mouth, the feel of truth in action, and kind of a laboratory in a way to practice some of that, because at first we're just kind of speechless. We can sit at Thanksgiving dinner and notice that the whole thing is operating from some kind of a separation, suffering place, and we know something else is possible that looks more like love, but we're just kind of mute there. And so many beings are at this place where they're like, I can see that there's something fishy about that, but I have no idea what to do, no idea how to speak, no idea how to move. And we really do need, in a way, laboratories to start to feel like we're in a protected, safe space while we practice speaking what's true. And while we also learn from watching, I think that that's part of what happens in my work, to whatever degree that I'm moving and speaking from the truth, is that people see that modeled. I remember when I was younger, before I'd had my daughter, and I went to my friend's preschool class, and I subbed sometimes because I recognized that she had this brilliance with children that was just like something I really wanted to learn and be around. And I remember seeing her do things that I had never seen anyone do with children. And just that example helped me to see what was possible. So it's almost like we need to go to how do I live true school in a way. And I feel like that's what I'm trying to provide for people as best I can, is that laboratory. But when we hear about true yin and true yang, how do I get there? We always think, how do I get there? And it's not a learning in the head. It's really a willingness to both try new things and enter realms that we may not have entered. For example, we just had the yin month of my Holy Essentials course, and some of the homework is things like lose at a game and then hang out in what it's like to lose, and what are the messages in there, and what are the feels in there, and can you hang out and digest without making it about you being a loser? Can you enter into the place where you soften before you're going to let something come out of your mouth, and you feel and you digest some of the feelings there, etc. So some of it is experimentation and really learning in our own skin that the places we've been taught are no-go zones are actually realms of us that need to be reclaimed and integrated for our fullness.
Beautiful. Yes. It reminds me of the I Ching. You speak a lot about, how the river just flows naturally. And the I Ching, being the book of changes, the 64 hexagrams correlate to the 64 codons. And the one in particular that comes to mind is the third hexagram. And it's where something new comes into the world. And it's called difficulty at the beginning. And so there is this sort of chaos that happens when something's being deconstructed, and there's a disorientation. There's no real structures in the world yet to support what's emerging. They're being formed around this. And so the structures aren't quite here, but we're still navigating this pulse coming into the world and into our lives, individually and collectively. And how do we sit with it to understand what's being revealed? How, let it reveal itself, so we know the proper environment and structures to create, to direct it, to nourish it, and to make it available to others. So it feels like what you're describing and the work that, what's unraveling or has unraveled through you, how you've navigated and tended this consciousness, this freedom that consciousness has through you. how you've created environments to give other people access to that and to light them up and let them take it into their reality and do the same. It's this sort of mycelium network, as it moves out and creates this bedrock for an emergence of the fruit that's waiting to be brought forward.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, at its best, therapy is a place for people, is a laboratory for people, to the extent that the therapist is aware of the beauty of the place of the unknown, of not knowing, the beauty of breakdown and all that, that we're not just trying to sweep up the broken glass of our breakdown and buying a new cup, but that we're actually seeing that whatever is falling off of us needs time to break down, time to digest, and we need time for the birth of the version of ourselves that is wanting to come forward, to be on wobbly legs, like a wobbly chick. And it's so beautiful, the cycle of birth and death and all that happens between the birthing and the dying and the stillness is all sacred. And that's one of the perspectives of yin, is that anywhere along the line of silence, of the seed resting in the ground, of the tiny sprout, of the foal on wobbly legs, and the adolescent awkwardness, all the way to the beautiful flower and the beautiful fruit, and then all the way down with the fading and the softening and all that. That any point on that wheel is beauty, is sacredness, is rightness, is and being itself rests the same behind every place on the wheel in all of its glory. It's as though being in its stillness is dancing around this wheel of birthing and dying, coming into existence and fading out of existence. It's just this, it's happening all around us, in nature, in our psyches, in our societies, on our earth. And there's nothing, there's no more beauty to birthing than dying. There's no more beauty to fruiting than decomposing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's really telling, in our culture, how we treat our elders, that is that wisdom, that's come to this full cycle of life, and it's ready to give back, transfer its wisdom to the next generation. Yet we've cut that off by separating them from society.
Right. Like they're no longer a good one.
Yeah.
They're put them out to pasture,
Mm-hmm.
you know? Yeah.
Yeah. And it's essential that cycle continue by having the new shoots, just like a flower that decomposes, all the information in the DNA of that flower's life cycle and that flower's generation of flowers is brought back into the earth with information for the next generation. And it's the same in human beings. And because of how our value system, we've cut that off.
Yeah. And you can see it reflected in all of the ones that we cut off.
Mm-hmm. All of the
What
ones.
we
Yeah.
glorify is Apollo. What we glorify is the height of youth and the productivity. The product is all, that the process is nothing, and that those who limp, those who are ill, those who are differently abled, those who are, just anything different, is seen as less than Apollo.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, one of the most beautiful things I ever saw or witnessed in my entire life, honestly, was at a retreat with someone who had recently been very traumatized by some hospital experiences and could barely join the group, it turns out, because of how challenged she was. And I was up supporting her a lot. And at one point during one of the meditations, I think I had invited her to do this. I'm not sure, but during one of the meditations or something, the whole room was quiet. She was up in a room upstairs with a tiny balcony and then stairs that came down. And while we had our eyes closed, she came out of her room. She hadn't been able to join the group. She came out of the room, was at the top of the stairs, and lifted her voice and sang some kind of a gorgeous, vulnerable song. Out of the heart of the depth of where she was being driven came this incredible, delicious, vulnerable, heartbreaking song.
Mm.
And we, because we silence and other um, so much in our culture, we are impoverished. We are impoverished, and we are not allowing those who are, instead of scaling the mountain, they're actually they're doing an equivalent journey down into the realm of the unconscious, into the realm of the disowned, and bringing back jewels, bringing back, and because we have learned to regard ourselves as we need to take ourselves away, the commons, the marketplace is not a safe place to be nakedly vulnerable. All of that beauty is hidden away under shame, that we're a broken one. We need to go to the island of broken toys because we can't produce right now, etc. But the beauty and the strength and the model of the wounded healer or the hero who goes into the unknown, or Inanna, who goes down into the nether realms and is completely taken apart, returns, and brings the light of consciousness to whole realms of the human psyche and the collective psyche that we have refused to inhabit. And when we are invited to inhabit, those people become our guides. And right now, I feel like during the dark night and all of that, I felt like I was being prepared to be able to witness and be through anything, and to assist others too as well, because those people become the guides that can assist others over that bridge of fear and grief that stands between us and our deeper capacities. And people look at me crazy, like I'm crazy when they come in. They're like, "Oh my God, I'm suffering my butt off, and everything's wrecking in my life." And I have this look like, "Congratulations,
Yeah.
a new healer is being born." And in
Yeah.
the middle of that darkness, we can't know that anything good is happening. It just looks. And I don't think we're supposed to. It wouldn't be the dark if we had some hippie skippy attitude toward it.
Right. Right. Yeah. Mm.
And this is also the beauty of all the work being done in trauma resolution now. It's like we are learning that all of these groups we othered, from the Vietnam vet to the homeless person, to people who have experienced genocide and so act in a certain way, we're starting to understand, oh my gosh, they carry trauma. And that's why they're like that. And the othering, there's a chance for othering to stop in the recognition there, but for the grace of God go I. And any of us at any moment can experience, the toughest part of living on earth can be brought to bear on any of us, and that there is an amazing healing potential gift in each being that has been initiated into the dark, to the degree that we can sort of digest, heal, and recover and bring the gems back.
Yeah. Yeah. That's I've noticed it in my work. It's an imago, imago therapy. Maybe we talked about this before, where you tend to choose a partner who will bring up your wound so you can face it, so you can heal it. You're not always grateful for that, but it's what we do. It's like how nature works, right? It wants to be whole, so it's going to attract someone into your life that mirrors your wound, that drives you crazy to the point where you will see it. Otherwise, it goes unseen, it's hidden, and then it's empowered. So in order for it to be disempowered and not hold you back anymore from being whole, it gets exposed. And I see that too in people's charts when I look at the DNA and the astrology combined, that we come in with a sacred wound, a core wound, and we attract into our lives people and situations that will aggravate that to the point where we seek in order to heal that, to make it whole. And so it's like there's this sacred wound we carry, and then there's an antidote to it in the world that happens to be related to our life's work. And when they come together and we allow that wound to be unwound in a way that it gets touched, the wisdom that's underneath that, covering that, protecting that, tightening, is what our gift is to the world. And that's that wounded healer archetype as well. So I'm really fascinated how this microcosmic imago in our intimate relationship shows up in the larger scale of the work or the gift that each person carries into the world, and how that gets imagoed out of us in a way to be given. And the whole is never whole until everybody's, given what they've come to give, and what we carry doesn't belong to us. It belongs to the collective. So you're one of those beings who has been cracked open, and now you're a fountain where people can come and dip in. And, the people that are attracted to your medicine and your offerings are finding you. And it's just this incredible organic intelligence that orchestrates this in a way that we get to acquiesce and trust. But it does take a lot of undoing to get there, because we've been so conditioned to be the doer. And until we recognize that we're being done through, we really don't have the capacity to be curious, because we're still trying to be in control. And curiosity is what really opens the bandwidth for consciousness to have its free expression and generosity to itself in other forms flow without limitation.
Yeah, one of the things that's striking me as you're talking, and I'm reflecting on the part of true strength, and that all this is that it really does. We can think about and plot and plan our evolution as much as we can, and certainly when I was a younger person, I can remember just how badly I wanted to just be a confident, rooted being who knew how to move through a variety of situations and be completely used for the gift that was inside of me, that I didn't really, I knew it had to do something with loving. That's all I knew. And how much the process is actually knocking on our doors all the time in the form of the things that we might want to go away. And how there was nothing, I can claim no virtue for example, the circumstances in my life and the way that the dark night sort of cornered me to crack my nut open. There's nothing I did
Right.
of virtue or anything. And how when I work with people, their mind is trying to get there. It's trying to evolve there. It's trying to think about there. It's trying to go there. And all the while below their awareness, there's something peeking out, usually something like an insecurity or an inability or a grief or whatever, that totally has all of this. It's as though I'm watching a bud trying to open, and the person's going, not that, I want to go up, I want to evolve. And the invitation often to growth is an invitation down, because
Right.
we need so much deconstruction, we need so much decomposition for us to be spacious and open and humble enough to be remade in the aliveness of our own living soul. So it's kind of comical, in a certain way, that it's like, it's like we're this tiny island of consciousness, almost like a little ant on a island in the middle of the Pacific or something, going, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And then below us is just this giant sea creature that's going, I can take you there, but you need to come down with me. And we're like, oh no, go away, go away. I'm going to climb up to heaven.
Mhm.
But the
Mhm.
process of embodiment and of living full has so much down, so much grief, so much digestion, so much facing things we've never wanted to face and breaking them down. And that's what our emotional system does. It's like our soul's digestive system, which we have been taught, not to use, that even using it is a sign that we're a loser.
Mm, mm. Yeah. It's like I see all these people wanting to sign up for the loser club now.
Totally. Know them by their sign.
So, yeah, how do we become part of that loser club then, Jeannie? I know you're offering some things, and let's hear about it. You have some online offers that are coming up, and this is
Well,
such
this
a
is like, it's like yin time, it feels like it's,
uh,
I don't know, usually my daughter said something fun to me lately, that she was going to come and visit me and go into the dark with me, spend like November and December, and we're like, hey, because we're little yin sorceresses, um but uh I just came out with a whole bunch of things that I'm doing. One of them is related to they're all related to what we've been talking about, but the one coming up on March 12th, I call it Yin Takeover, Dark Night and the Feminine. And I've been trying to do a regular meeting on the Dark Night, just so that people who
mhm,
are experiencing that can have a place to kind of ask questions and make sense of what's happening to them. But really, the Dark Night, or any kind of deconstruction, or any kind of trauma, difficulty, loss, causes some of our structures to take a whack and deconstruct. So, and how that's related to yin, to the feminine, is what I'll be talking about there. And then a week later, there's a call called The Power of Yin, where I'm going to talk more about the potency, of yin. The 27th, I'm going to be talking about vulnerability, which to me is an expression of yin, to soften and to open. And then in April, I'm going to do a series called Yin, Strength, and Power. And I've done a similar series before. And when I do a series, it just gives a group a chance to go together through, I think this one may have 5 calls, where we really look deeply into a particular theme. All my stuff, it's like a theme. And just in case people are like, yikes, are you going to like dump me in the deep end? The calls have meditation, guided meditation, a talk. And during that time, people have their screens off. So they're just seeing me so that they can be not distracted. And then people have a chance to ask questions or exchange with me. They can come on with their video and their audio, or just their audio, or they can ask a question through the chat anonymously. So people can really come and not feel like, they have to do something, or because these edges of the unknown in us, even if we're pulled toward them, we're also, scared, because, and I know, I can remember the very first time that I that I had a co-counseling session when I was in my 20s. I was scared out of my gourd. I was absolutely scared out of my gourd. To have someone looking at me and paying attention to me was like
mm,
terrifying. So I have a lot of humility for, and understanding of all the places along
mm.
this kind of dying, being reborn thing.
Yeah. Well, I'll say I've attended the 5-part series, and it's wonderful. I really appreciated it. And you draw such a lovely group of people into your work. It's So how, I mean, your teaching is, of course, stellar, but then all the questions people bring and the shares are just so enriching.
Yeah,
So
thanks.
I'm really glad you're offering it again. I may even be there.
If
I was,
we can't, when we can't get enough of yin. When we do the yin month, which we recently did in Holy Essentials, and I keep referring to these, they're 8-month programs that I do every fall. I have Holy Essentials 1, Holy Essentials 2, and this fall I'm adding Holy Essentials 3. But in Holy Essentials 1, there's a whole month we spend on yin. And at the end of the yin month, people are always like, can we do yin longer? Can we do it forever? Because
right.
we're so hungry for the medicine of sinking and softening and resting and pausing and learning about our depths. It's really, at first it's like, what are you talking about? And then it's like, wow, how did I ever live without this?
Mhm, mhm, mm. I
Yeah.
was trying to remember how we first met, and I know it now. It was,
Oh, I'd love to hear this.
yeah. Well, I was going through my undoing, and I did a search on YouTube for Dark Night of the Soul, and there was an interview that you had done. And so I listened to it, and then I immediately reached out and asked you if I could interview you. That's how it all started.
Well, I remember we hit it off right from the beginning.
Yeah, I remember interviewing you, and I was it was the first time I had that experience where I wasn't in control, right? Like there was something that had come into the space, and I couldn't think what, I mean, I'm never planning the questions anyway, but I couldn't, usually I have something come up, and I'll be tracking. And I was like, yeah, I was just empty. And then I remember watching myself trying to be a good interviewer and everything just kind of falling open to what wanted to come and be shared just through conversation. And I just keep going with that, and recognize that that's what happens when I teach. It's just always been there. I didn't recognize it until you actually gave permission. It was like, this is great. This is great. I'm like, really? This doesn't feel great, but okay.
Yeah, to hang out here clueless? What are you talking about? Which is another way of saying being.
Right.
When we don't know what to speak or to do, the realm of being opens up, and we have been taught to skedaddle on out of there. So, yay. And I remember
But I
that.
feel
What,
like
what year
now,
was that? Do you remember what year?
oh, no, I don't. It's got to be 8 years ago. Something like
Like
that.
2014? Something like that?
Maybe. Yeah.
I want to see if I can look back, and it'd be fun to listen to that interview. We have so many interviews, and I haven't really shared them much. So hopefully with this new website, I'll start. I'm wanting to kind of get old stuff that I have put on. Oh, we've got this great thing, but I have nowhere to put it. Kind of put more stuff out there for people to listen to, because we've certainly covered some great topics together.
Yeah. It's been a great ride. Well, thank you again for your time today and sharing the offers you have coming up. JeannieZandi.com is your website. Do you have a different website for your school, or they find it there as well?
They can find it there, but if they want to go straight to the school, it's school.jeanniezandi.com. And by school, I just mean it's powered by a software called Thinkific, and it's a website all on its own that has self-guided courses people can just buy and watch. Some of them are free, and some of them are just like a 2-hour meeting. Some of them are a series of 6 or 8 on different topics. And there's certainly a bunch on what we've been talking about, both yin, the dark night. There's a little bit about yang. And I also post through there my stuff coming up, but I think the website has the calendar, and it has all the same stuff sort of organized in a way with an overview. So either one, www.jeanniezandi.com, is probably the more thorough picture.
Yeah. And I'll put a link to that website on this podcast and
Thank you.
below the video. And yeah, it'll be easy for people to find you. And hopefully I'll meet some of them there. And thank you all for tuning in. It's been a great pleasure. And until next time, be
Mwah.
well. Yeah. And just fill up on the yin.
Yay. Thank
Thank
you.
you, Jeannie.
Yes, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.